Metro on WDET. I'm Robyn Vincent. Today we're following developments in the case of Lue Yang. He's a 47-year-old Hmong refugee, a father of 6, and a longtime Lansing area community leader. Yang was detained by Immigration and Customs Enforcement in July. Now, despite a decades-old conviction that Michigan courts have since expunged, federal immigration law still treats that record differently. That conviction was for attempted second-degree home invasion when Yang was 19. Yang has been moved across facilities, including the federal staging site in Alexandria, Louisiana. His case comes as the government has accelerated removals of Southeast Asian refugees this year. Now, we've heard reports that a plane left last night with a leg to Laos, where Yang has never lived. And we have contacted ICE but have yet to confirm this. For the latest, we're joined by Aisa Villarosa, an immigration attorney with the Asian Law Caucus. She's been tracking due process concerns and advocating for families like the Yangs. And a quick note before we begin, the facts here are evolving. We'll separate what's confirmed from what we're still trying to verify. Aisa, welcome back to the Metro.
Hi, Robyn. Thanks so much for having me back. And I'm glad that you're not here in my office because it's looking quite a bit of a mess right now.
Tell me more. Why is it looking so messy?
Yeah, it's been a long night, and I am not even the closest to this, as you mentioned. This has been so difficult for Anne, for her family.
Anne Vu, who is the wife of Lue Yang.
Yes, her and Lue's 6 children. As you mentioned, and since we've talked, for Lue, who's been detained since July, there's been a almost yo-yo-like movement across different placements. First from Baldwin, Michigan, which is the largest facility in the Midwest, to Louisiana, 2 different facilities, and as you mentioned, most recently to Alexandria, which is commonly known as a human FedEx facility, so a facility where we often see some of the worst deportation flights go out, sometimes to CCOT, sometimes to Guantanamo.
So this has been a major ordeal, to understate what's been happening here, a major situation both for Lue Yang, for his family, for many other people like Lue Yang who have been ensnared in these proceedings. What is the most reliable information you have about Lue Yang's location and status at this moment?
Yeah, I would liken the challenge faced by families and attorneys and advocates to locating their loved ones, even without being in this particular period of final staging, as solving a riddle within a riddle. So for many folks who are detained, there can be some knowledge of where someone is placed through particular websites, something called the online detainee locator system. However, often, once someone is placed into what we call final staging, that is the preeminent step before a removal flight, that almost substantially drops in accuracy. So folks can literally disappear from the website. We've found instances where folks' basic information is jumbled up, or it otherwise is really hard to track a loved one. So for myself, for my organization, Asian Law Caucus, and for Lue and the team, one of our best sources of information is a group called Human Rights First. Folks might have seen their work in the news, etc. This is work started by a wonderful person named Tom Cartwright, who really of his own volition began to track hundreds and hundreds of removal flights since the start of this administration. That work has now landed at Human Rights First, and through them there's a number of intertwined signal threads and phone calls where everyone is trying to figure out, is it this Omni charter flight going out on this date? Is it this commercial flight from this airport? So through a mishmash of tracking websites, of talking to loved ones who might have managed to get a phone call out to loved ones before they're shipped out. It's really hard to say. There's no rhyme or reason, but we're glad to have some allies in this process.
So in addition to the trauma and the unknowns of being in immigration detention itself, it is also the very shadowy ways that immigration officials are operating and the lack of information that families, that advocates, that people
Yes.
like you, an immigration attorney who is highly connected, highly informed, but even in your shoes, you find yourself running into these huge roadblocks in trying to get clarity on what's happening for people.
Absolutely. And a really great example of why this matters is at the moment, there aren't too many really potent, uniformly strong legal hooks to keep someone from, for example, being deported. One of the few is something called a habeas petition. And essentially, that is a legal motion that an attorney needs to file in typically the federal jurisdiction where someone is detained. These motions often involve sleepless nights, a lot of scrambling. Too often, someone might not have their full criminal or immigration file, for example. And so while this in itself is difficult, if you just simply don't know the location, right, that you're supposed to file the habeas, talk about a disadvantage. So it's both just critical for any sort of legal defense, and then on top of what Anne and the kids are feeling right now, where for Lue, it's a bit of a guessing game. So as you mentioned, there is knowledge that a removal attempt to Laos and actually to many other countries is in motion at this moment. I can't share too many specifics, both for the safety of folks involved, but also because this is a very quickly shifting atmosphere. What I can say is that from evidence that is credible, this flight is big. It is a flight where possibly upwards of 250 loved ones are on a single plane. Like a few of the flights we've seen earlier this year to countries like Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, also Nepal, Romania. It's such a smattering. Folks are shackled on multiple parts of their body, even when they have to use the bathroom. So we're looking at a really, really harrowing journey that quite a few folks are also trying to stop at this moment.
Sure, because you're painting a very inhumane picture here, imagining people being shackled, taking a flight that is going across oceans and multiple countries. I want to focus on Lue Yang for a moment here because some people listening might say, what is different in this situation? Lue Yang had this conviction, and what we have mentioned is that Michigan cleared Yang's decades-old conviction under its clean slate law. But the thing is, federal immigration rules still count it. So explain to us, why doesn't that state expungement protect him under immigration law? And do you believe ICE respected due process steps in this, such as notice, access to counsel, or a stay of removal?
Yeah, there's so much to unpack. So I'll try to break it down without too much legalese. For the expungement, It's a really good question, and the first barrier is that by and large, immigration court proceedings, there's almost a solid line on top of a solid line between immigration court and criminal court and federal court. These universes are all different. Sometimes they're related, but for purposes of an expungement, unfortunately, that in of itself does not help someone's immigration case. And more specifically, it does not help challenge someone in Lue's case who has a final order of removal. We mentioned earlier that Lue picked up this final removal order because of a teenage offense. Like so many of us, we have done so much in our youth that, looking into the future, we should get second chances, right? And here is Lue, someone who was, handed this sentence, did his time actually, and then was on good behavior such that he got this expungement. It's almost an added sentence, because the reason why Lue was arrested by ICE in July of this year was based on that 1997 conviction. And that's where the due process challenge comes in, because with prior immigration proceedings, with Lue's immigration record, essentially a court said to Lue, hey, you can go back into the community.
Are you there?
Well,
I just,
sorry, Robyn.
No worries.
Yeah.
I just heard from you that a court said, hey, you can go back into the community.
Yeah. So the court has said you can go back into the community. You're not a safety risk. You just have to go into an ICE office and do a check-in, every year, every 6 months, etc. So Lue was doing that without fail until very surprisingly getting picked up by ICE. The only conviction on his record being that expunged conviction from 1997. And the other big constitutional issue is right now there are a lot of legal challenges around re-detaining someone without due process. So that due process could look like a bond hearing. It could look like a piece of paper that tells you why you're being re-detained. These things do not take place with Lue, and we are seeing often that they're not taking place with many members of our community targeted by ICE.
I mean, what I'm hearing from you, and what I also heard from An Vu, who is Lue's wife, is that he took that perceived second chance and did a lot of good with it and became an upstanding community leader in the Lansing area, and a really reliable and dedicated father and husband. And so now it sounds like that second chance has been pulled away from him. I want to end on this note. ICE has increased removals of Southeast Asian refugees through its Alexandria, Louisiana staging hub. What changes have you observed in the government's approach to Southeast Asian deportations this year? And how has that affected your client's ability to challenge or even track those removals in the last minute that we have here?
Yeah, there's so much to be said about the Hmong refugee community, a people who, like Lue, families fought in a secret war that was led by America, gave so much for this country even when they weren't here, then came here through refugee resettlement. And all this time, through all those decades, there was no formal repatriation agreement between the U.S. and Laos. That is why we did not see removals to Laos until this year. And going back to that due process challenge, how can you fight your case if something simply was not in existence? But maybe to conclude with Lue, I have never encountered someone where folks' love of someone is so palpable, even if I've never met him. Lue being a spiritual guide to his community is also really significant because many folks don't know this. Back in the 70s and after the Secret War, because of all the trauma the Hmong folks endured, many Hmong folks actually passed away in their sleep. And this actually gave rise to Freddy Krueger, the film. And here is Lue, a spiritual guide who's actually keeping community intact and a system that's trying to remove him from his community.
Aisa Villarosa from the Asian Law Caucus, thank you for sharing what you know with us and what's still uncertain about the case of Lue Yang.
Thank you.